So this is one of those mornings when I think it's appropriate to give a shout out to our coffee ministry who so faithfully serve us, and thankful for that. It wouldn't be the same without it. Guarantee you my sermons wouldn't be the same without it. So both on my end and on your end, I'm sure. So that's okay. Hey, the book of Titus. So we're heading towards Easter, and we're kind of reaching the end of Titus, and you're like, what's going to happen next? So here's the plan. Next Sunday, we're going to top off our study of the book of Titus. And then the next Sunday, the 24th of March, we're going to have what I hope for you and for me both is a special message. A special message, personal story, could not be shared in the same way on any other day than March the 24th. And so I'm looking forward to sharing that story with you. That's 2 weeks from today, and that's going to really build a bridge from the book of Titus to Easter Sunday and help us mobilize, I hope, as a faith family to invite people to come with us on that day. So then Easter Sunday, March the 31st, that is like 3 weeks from today. And then April, and you know what I'd really like to preach on in April? What I would really like to do is start over in the book of Titus. That's really what I'm not going to do it, wouldn't do it to you, but I just appreciate this book so much and feel like it's been helpful for us. As I've I'm finishing up memorizing the book and just going back over all the material that we've covered in these 3 chapters. I feel like it's so important. It really is a North Star of the book of Titus for us as a church. So here's one way that you can avoid me preaching through the book of Titus again starting in April, is if you'll just take a little bit of time to read through Titus 1, 2, 3 times this week, and then 1, 2, 3 times next week. If you'll read through the book of Titus a few more times as we reach the end, I won't preach on it again starting in April, and we'll just call it good. But I think it would be good for us to continue to keep this vision alive in our minds that the way to be the church in a culture of Cretans is to be formed by the beautiful gospel and to become the beautiful people that God has created us to be. That's the message of Titus, that Jesus gave himself for us in a beautiful act of self-sacrifice so that we could be redeemed from wickedness and become a pure people who belong to him and then look like him in the world and carry out his good works in the world. That's the beautiful vision of Titus that we want to keep alive at Trinity Bible Church. And so as we've thought about that and we've painted this picture, or really Paul through Titus has painted this picture of a beautiful church that's formed by its beautiful origin story in the gospel, that as we think about this beautiful people that God is creating in the world that look like him and do his good works in the world, the last week and this week, what we're doing is we're going to reverse engineer that vision a little bit. We're reverse engineering that vision from this beautiful picture to something that has to be in place for that beautiful picture to become a reality. We began the subject last week. We're going to finish it this week. In order for there to be a beautiful church, there must be beautiful leaders who oversee and shepherd it. There must be beautiful leaders. A beautiful church is dependent on beautiful leaders. And we saw Paul begin his letter to Titus where he's going to advocate for a beautiful church. He starts by advocating for beautiful leaders. Specifically in the passage that we're in, beautiful elders. Elders are those men in the church who've been given the most significant level of accountability and responsibility and stewardship to oversee the health and well-being, to use a Titus word, the soundness of the church. And so everything we say this morning is going to have a one-to-one correspondence with those as we think about elders. But this passage is instructive to more than just those who are elders or aspire to be, because this passage just informs us on what it means to be a spiritual leader, a leader in the church, to have spiritual leadership. In my view is that every one of us is a spiritual leader, or has the potential and some accountability to be a spiritual leader. You may say, well, I'm not a leader. Well, the reality is your church thinks you are. We think you are. And we want you to be well equipped as a leader. The Trinity, our desire for this church is to be a church that equips wholehearted followers, that creates wholehearted followers, and at the same time creates influential leaders. Not two different groups of people, but the same group of people. All of us becoming wholehearted followers and becoming people of influence. Because God has given each one of us a vision for things that ought to be better. He's given each one of us a vision of a better world in some particular area of passion. And He wants us to develop the credibility and take the initiative to influence others towards that. We want to be a church that equips people in this process. So this passage, as it instructs us on the marks of a beautiful leader, is important to all of us. And so what I'd like to do is kind of refresh our definition of a beautiful leader and then continue on in our study of this passage. So we're in Titus chapter 1. And our passage begins in verse 5, goes all the way through verse 9. And I want to, we started part of it last week, and we're finishing it up this week. Because of that, the structure, I want you to understand the structure. I don't usually share the bones of my, outline. I don't usually think that's necessary, but I want to make sure that everyone has a clear mental picture of what we're doing. So we said last week that a beautiful leader is a beautiful follower who excels in life and doctrine. That's our outline, really, for this passage. A beautiful leader is a beautiful follower who excels in life and doctrine. We'll fill in the space between life and doctrine here in a minute, but first I want us just to read this passage with this basic framework in mind: a beautiful follower who excels in life and doctrine. Beginning in chapter 1, verse 5. The reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. An elder must be blameless, faithful to his wife, a man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. Since an overseer manages God's household, he must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. Rather, he must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. This passage unpacks this definition of beautiful follower who excels in life and doctrine. I'd like to just kind of share the inside part of this, and then we'll explore these ideas in the passage. But one of the things we see in this passage is that Paul breaks down we'll get to that in a minute. This passage just describes a beautiful follower. That's probably the first point to make about it. That's the first point we made about it last week, is that this passage describes the norm for every Jesus follower. This is not a special level of qualification for leader. It's the norm for every follower. Leaders need to demonstrate success in these qualities, but it's the norm for every believer. It's non-negotiable for leaders, but it's normal for all of us. It's just a wholehearted follower. That's the first part of this definition. That's the first observation about these qualifications. It's that these are just qualifications of a wholehearted follower. But they're the qualifications. This is a wholehearted follower who excels in these qualities. He's blameless. That word occurs 2 different times. Blameless. It means not only is there nothing wrong with this person, that's not a high enough standard. The question is there something right about this person? Do they excel? Is there something about this person that compels us? That compels us to want to be like them, that compels us to want to give them credibility and influence in our lives? That's the question. Not is there something wrong with them, but is there something right with them? A beautiful leader is a beautiful follower who excels in these two categories, life and doctrine. Life in this passage, just for purposes of kind of understanding it, giving us something to hang these different parts on, life in this passage consists of two things. First is personal responsibility. That's the first part of life where a leader must excel, and that is in his current responsibilities, his current or her current areas of stewardship as spiritual leaders. And a leader's first area of responsibility is their family. And so holding out the standard for spiritual leaders, and especially for elders, that they are leaders of their family. They are faithful to their wives. They are involved and responsible and engaged in the discipling of their children. So that's life. They excel in life, in their current responsibilities. And then, secondly, not just in life, but also, not their current responsibilities, but the second part of life is in their character, their personal character. Now, the reason I'm going through this outline, we're going to leave this outline here in a minute, but I just want you to see the structure. Last week, we left off, let's go back one slide, and we left off right there. A beautiful leader, a beautiful follower who excels in life, specifically current responsibility. But this morning, what we want to do is pick up with this idea of personal character and take it to through the rest of the passage. So I want you to see that, and I want you to see also that as we discuss personal character, that Paul is going to describe negative traits and then positive traits. So that's our outline. That hopefully gives you some mental hooks to place the things we're going to talk about. We're really starting at the subject of personal character, that a leader is a beautiful follower who excels in personal character. And we're going to spend significantly more time on the negative than the positive this morning, because I think that's what we, in our culture, I think we need to do some attending to this idea of personal character in the things that a leader does not practice. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So we notice in this passage, so the negative traits begin in verse 7. Since an overseer manages God's household, he must be blameless. And then Paul lists 5 different areas, 5 different negative qualities that a leader should not manifest. He says, he must not be quick-tempered, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. The first territory that Paul covers in his description of a beautiful leader's character is that a beautiful leader is a spiritual leader who has mastered their dark side. It's interesting that Cesar talked about the dark side this morning. I didn't know it till I asked someone, so what'd you learn in Cesar's discipleship track today? And they said, we talked about the dark side. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because I'm talking about the very same thing, a leader's dark side. Now, when I talk about dark side, I don't mean that every leader has an area of hypocrisy. I don't mean that every leader has an area of hidden secret sin. That's not what I mean by dark side. I don't mean that inside every leader is some terrible quality just waiting to come out. I use this phrase dark side to speak not of someone's hidden sin. That's not what I mean by that, because there are spiritually authentic leaders who don't have hidden sins. Their sins are public for everyone to see. But what I do mean is this. Think about this. Every spiritual leader, even your pastors, even your elders, are fully formed sinners, saved by grace, and in need of continual sanctification. Now think about that for a minute. We all agree, fully formed sinners. Everyone is a fully formed sinner, even your leaders. Saved by grace. They weren't saved by any better qualities than you were, just all of us by grace, and still in need of continual sanctification. Think about this. The persons who are assigned with the spiritual oversight of your church are still in need of sanctification. They are still in need. There are unsanctified parts of them. And hear what Paul says. So it's not hypocrisy for a leader to have areas of their life that they know are areas of struggle. That is not hypocrisy. That is not hidden sin. The key is what that leader is doing about those areas where they struggle the most. A leader who is aware, who is attending to these areas. That's the key. Not that leaders don't have them, because we all have them. No pastor, elder, staff person, Bible study leader, teacher is perfect. We are fully formed sinners, still in need of continual sanctification. The key is that dark side is not something that manifests itself. It's not something that emerges in the carrying out of their duties, both at home and the church. It is something that they are authentically dealing with and experiencing success in. Basically, the idea is that a spiritual leader, the mark of a beautiful leader, is someone who is winning the war in their sanctification and continuing to grow, and is authentic about it and doesn't hide sin. That's what we mean by the dark side. And a spiritual leader is someone who has mastered that dark side. They are winning the war on their sanctification. They are growing. They are authentic. They are realistic about their faults and their flaws and their areas of sinfulness, and they are attending to them. This is really important for spiritual leaders. One reason is because spiritual leadership puts pressure on your dark side. Being in a role of authority and responsibility is going to put unique pressure on your unsanctified parts. And so you have to be, if you want to aspire to leadership, you have to pay special attention to those areas and not think, well, maybe I can get away with that. Second reason it's really important. First, it puts unique pressure on your unsanctified parts. And the second is because failure as a spiritual leader has unique fallout in the body. James says, don't aspire to be careful if you aspire to be a teacher, because you're going to have a stricter judgment. The role of spiritual leaders in the body, their failure has a greater fallout. And so, a person who wants to be a spiritual leader, who aspires to spiritual leadership, a church that selects spiritual leaders, needs to pay attention. Has that person mastered their dark side? And Paul lists 5 qualities here. 5 different qualities. 3 of them are relational. 2 of them are kind of related to maybe self-control or other areas. So we're going to take them out of order. We're going to save the relational ones for a minute. We're going to first talk about the one where he says in verse 7 that one right there in the middle, not given to drunkenness. We'll just pick that one for starters. Not given to drunkenness. That's one of the qualities, one of the dark sides that a leader has to have control of. Not given to drunkenness. And you remember, this is not a quality that is unique to spiritual leaders. It is expected of all people in the body. Paul has already said to the older men in the church, don't be given to drunkenness. Paul has already said to the older women in the church, don't be enslaved to much wine. Paul has already said to the younger women and the younger men in the church, be self-controlled. Paul has already told everyone in the church, be self-controlled. So, when it comes to the use of alcohol, Paul holds leaders to the same standard. He holds all believers that they are not abusive, not enslaved to the use of alcohol, that they use caution. And the idea is this for spiritual leaders, that spiritual leaders not only use caution, but they don't resort to something else. They don't resort to alcohol or anything else to numb them or to help them cope. The minute you start to use alcohol as a way of numbing or helping you cope, that's a danger sign. And that's for all of us. That's for everyone. But especially true of leaders. The pressure of leading may lead someone to want to cope or numb themselves. But the fallout of being irresponsible in that area is great in the church. Very important. Proper relationship with all areas of life that you might use for numbing or coping. And then he says the other kind of non-relational quality here, arguably, is not pursuing dishonest gain. It must have been a problem. Well, it was a problem in Crete, because in the very next paragraph, Paul talks about these rebellious teachers who are going around teaching things they ought not to teach, and he says, and they're doing it for the purpose of dishonest gain. Apparently, in those days, it was possible to get rich in ministry. That was a long time ago. Rare is the person who today gets rich in ministry. But Paul is specific. He's talking primarily about money here. In Crete, there were people who were teaching things that were interesting and titillating, quarrels and controversies, those kinds of things, and they were building their own pocketbook by doing that. And Paul says that we're not to pursue dishonest gain. We know he's talking specifically about money because we can see 1 Timothy 3, same qualifications for an elder, and he says, not someone who loves money, not lovers of money. So that's the first issue here in not pursuing dishonest gain is not looking for ways to line your own pockets through ministry. But the application is broader than that. The application here in pursuing dishonest gain, I would say that dishonest gain is in any time you use your role as a spiritual leader to meet your own needs instead of the needs of the people around you. That is dishonest gain. It is possible for someone to aspire to spiritual leadership because they believe that as a spiritual leader, they desire the affirmation. They want to be the center of attention. It's fulfilling to their ego to play this role. And if someone pursues a role of spiritual leadership because of the affirmation, because of this being the center of attention, because of their ability to control things, because it strokes their ego, then that is dishonest gain. There are people who aspire to roles of spiritual influence because they want to build. Today, it's about building fame, building followers, building a platform, and it's all done under the umbrella of spiritual leadership. We're trying to meet our own needs for affirmation or for self-actualization, whatever. We're trying to meet our own needs by exercising spiritual leadership, but in reality, it's about us. It's easy. I have aspired to be a pastor my whole life. I've paid attention to people who aspire to be pastors. I see in me and in others the tendency, the vulnerability of trying to meet unmet emotional needs, unmet family of origin needs in ministry. That's a misuse. That's dishonest gain. Anyone who's trying to build popularity, followers, attention, dishonest gain. So I heard a pastor a couple of weeks ago, someone I really respect, say that ministry is one of those things. And so he said ministry, I always say spiritual leadership. so that it pertains to all of us. Spiritual leadership is one of those things where you can do all the right things for all the wrong reasons. When I heard that, I'd heard that before, and maybe I'd heard it from him before, I don't remember. But when I heard that, it just landed on me hard again. Yeah, you can do all the right things for all the wrong reasons, and that is dishonest gain. He went on to say most guys don't enter the ministry planning to exploit it to soothe their own ego. They may not even be aware of that. And they certainly don't aspire to ministry planning on doing that. I know one, I'm going to enter the ministry. I'm going to have a role of spiritual leadership. I'm going to become famous, and everybody's going to know my name. They don't necessarily plan on that. That's not their plan at the beginning, but they find themselves in a position where that becomes a possibility. They've not dealt with their dark side and their undeveloped emotional maturity, and so it becomes an avenue for that. And again, we know that the failure of the leader has great fallout in the rest of the body. So, not pursuing dishonest gain. Not given to drunkenness, not pursuing dishonest gain, and then boom, 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 he lists these 3 relational traits. Not overbearing, not quick-tempered, and not violent. How'd you like to walk into a room with someone who's overbearing, quick-tempered, and violent? I mean, like, yikes. He really picked some tough ones there. Why in the world did he pick not overbearing and not quick-tempered and not violent? Well, you see that those are all relational qualities, right? Those are all qualities you manifest in your relationship with other people. Maybe it's because on the island of Crete, that was the leadership model. You walk in and you force your will on other people. And he said, yeah, we're going to lead, but we're not going to lead like that. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's because Paul knows that in the church, as you lead and shepherd people, that you end up with difficult people and difficult circumstances. And you have to be able to manage your own emotional reactivity in those circumstances in order to model Jesus in the body. For whatever reason, he picks these 3 traits. Not someone who's a bully. Not someone who has a quick trigger. Not someone who is violent and rash and harsh and explosive. And so, interesting when you think about these categories that Paul has covered. He's really covered sex, money, and power. He covered sex when he said that a leader is blameless. He's faithful to his wife. He's covered money, not pursuing dishonest gain. And here he covers power. And he says a leader has to master their dark side. Not only do they need to master their dark side, it's not just all about avoiding certain things, but it's also about modeling certain things. And Paul lists several positive qualities here. Notice these positive qualities in the second half of beginning in verse 8. Rather, as opposed to not being like this, he is supposed to be like this. He must be hospitable. That word means a lover of strangers. Hospitable. One who loves what is good. That's another word parallel to lover of strangers. Lover of strangers, lover of good. 2 words. Lover of strangers, lover of good. So we have these qualities. One who loves strangers. One who loves what is good. Who is self-controlled, upright, godly, and disciplined. What do you notice about these qualities? Depending on how many times you've read through the book of Titus, maybe depending on how much memorization you've done in the book of Titus, you might notice a pattern here. First of all, there's that word self-controlled again. Self-controlled, it's the same quality that Paul says the whole church needs to be self-controlled. He says older men, younger women, younger men, implies it with older women. Self-control, and here it is asked of elders. Not only that, but we're familiar with this idea, one who loves what is good. I mean, that's one of the most Titus-y qualities in the whole book, that we are people who do good in the world. So here we've got self-controlled, already familiar with that idea in Titus. One who loves what is good, Already, we understand that's a big idea in Titus. Self-controlled, upright, holy, disciplined reminds me of the traits that we see in the end of chapter 2, where he says we say no to ungodliness and worldly passion, and we live self-controlled, upright, godly lives. It's this same language. Even the idea of hospitality, where he says he must be a lover of strangers, must be hospitable, even that idea finds a partner at the very end of the book where Paul says, listen, you guys, do everything you can to take care of Zenas the lawyer and Apollos. Give them everything they need as they go on their way. Even hospitality shows up again in the book. What are we saying here? We're saying the presence of the qualities, the beautiful qualities in a church, they have to first and foremost mark the leaders that you select, the leaders that you develop. Because the qualities that the leaders have are going to be present or absent in the church. The qualities that are present or absent in a leader are going to be present or absent in the church. And so Paul says, listen, hey, we're about creating a beautiful church. We're about creating a group of people who love strangers, a group of people who are self-controlled, a group of people who do what is good. And so you better pick leaders who love strangers and are self-controlled and do what is good. Because the qualities that are modeled in your leaders are the qualities that are going to be reproduced in your church. So you want someone who models, who excels in the qualities of Jesus. Someone who models and excels in the qualities that Jesus himself had. That's what you're looking for in a leader. High bar, yes. But that's exactly that's what we're trying to create in our church, right? And so if we want to create that in our church, people who look like Jesus, we got to make sure that we're selecting leaders and developing leaders who have those same qualities. So, a beautiful leader is a beautiful follower who excels in life. Personal responsibility, current responsibility, personal character, negative and positive. Not only they excel in life, but they also excel in doctrine. And that's the very last verse in this passage, verse 9. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. A beautiful leader is a beautiful follower who excels in life and doctrine. And here's it'd be easy to just run over the word doctrine and think, okay, I get what that means. They got to sign off on the doctrinal statement, right? It means more than that. When Paul uses the term doctrine in Titus, he is primarily talking about the core gospel. He's talking about the core gospel that Jesus gave himself for us, redeem us from wickedness, purify for himself a people that are his very own, and a leader in the body has to hold firmly to that message, hold firmly to their origin story, hold firmly to that truth as being the preeminent truth that we orbit around and that we use as the norm for our lives. So someone who holds firmly to that doctrine, and not only holds firmly to that doctrine, but again, because we've read the book of Titus, we know that it's not enough to just hold firmly to doctrine, but that leader also needs to know how to apply that doctrine. Because it's one thing to believe in God, but it's to say you know God, but it's another thing to have your behavior reflect that. And Paul says, chapter 2, verse 1, teach the behavior that is appropriate to sound doctrine. So it's not enough just to know the content of sound doctrine. A spiritual leader needs to also understand how that content should show up in life. And then finally, not only the content of the doctrine, how to apply that content in life, but also what that should look like in the lives of the different people that you're going to shepherd. He must be able to hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. He has to know how this sound doctrine applies to different categories of people and use it appropriately. What if you, instead of encourage some by sound doctrine and refute others? What if you refute those who need to be encouraged? And you end up encouraging people who need to be refuted. Sometimes, as elders and pastors, honestly, it's not clear. Does this person need to be encouraged or refuted? And you get those mixed up, and you create a real problem. And so a spiritual leader needs to understand true doctrine, how it applies, and be able to take it and use it appropriately in the lives of people. And that's what all this boils down to. Ultimately, the passage ends with discipling people. That's the purpose of a beautiful leader. The purpose of a beautiful leader is to help reproduce beautiful followers. And that kind of takes us full circle. So for us, as we think about this picture of a beautiful leader. They're just a beautiful follower who excels in life, their current responsibilities, their character, mastered their dark side, modeled the qualities of Jesus, and they excel in doctrine. They understand the truth of Scripture. They know how to apply it. They know how to apply it appropriately in the lives of different people. And that's the vision of a beautiful leader. And if you reverse engineer the picture of a beautiful church, that's where you end up, a beautiful leader. Beautiful churches. If you want to be a leader, you got to pay attention to your life. If you want to be a beautiful church, you got to pay attention to your leaders. That's how this passage comes together. So I'm going to imagine that there are three categories of people here this morning. I'm going to imagine there are three categories of us. I want to address each of you as we wrap this up. First of all, there's the category of the person who says, I am glad I'm not a leader because I don't want to have to do that list. And you know what? This sermon, it really wasn't for me. It wasn't for me because I don't want to be a leader. So because I don't want to be a leader, all that stuff he talked about doesn't apply to me. You understand, all these things he talked about, they're the norm for every believer. And for you to say, that message wasn't really for me because I don't plan on being a leader, then what you're saying is, I really plan to follow Jesus at a different level, at a lower level than the norm. That's really that's where I'm at. I want to challenge you on that idea. If you say, this list is not for me, then what you're doing is you're saying, I want to follow Jesus at a lower level. And Jesus doesn't give us that option. He says, you want to follow me, you die daily, you take up your cross, you follow me. And there's no, can I follow you but leave my cross here? How about I take my cross but I don't go with you? You know, Jesus says you do it all, right? So there aren't levels of following Jesus. So first I want to challenge anyone here who says, hey, this message was not for me because I don't plan on being a leader. And I don't want to have to follow those qualities. Okay, there's a second category of person. That's probably a bigger category this morning. I want to model these qualities. I want to model the qualities that are the norm for every believer. I want to manifest spiritual maturity in my life. I just don't want to take responsibility for anybody else. That's the second category of person. You say, I want to be mature and I want to look like Jesus, but I'm not a leader. Don't try to make me one. You know what I would say to that? I would say, you know what? If you care about manifesting these qualities in your life, you already are a leader. You already are a leader. The only thing that can disqualify you from leadership is not manifesting these qualities. So every one of you who says, I want these qualities in my life, you're already a leader. You may not be an organizational leader. Maybe you're not the person who should run the meeting or make the plans, but you are a person with a vision of something better that God wants to do in the world. You can take initiative about it, develop credibility, and influence other people toward that end. And if being a spiritual leader is about discipling other people, I wouldn't imagine that you would say, I want to be like Jesus, but I don't want to help anybody else be like Jesus. You wouldn't say that. So if you wouldn't say that, then you're saying, yes, I do want to be a leader. Maybe not an organizational leader, but I want to have influence in the lives of other people. I want to reproduce Jesus in other people. You're a leader. And if you're like, you still haven't sold me, I'll say, you don't want to be like the steward that has been given abilities and talents, expected to make a return on that, and instead you buried it because you were afraid. You don't want to be that. So you do want to be someone who has influence in the lives of other people. That's what I want to challenge you to think about, is expanding your area, your influence in the lives of other people for their own development. As a church, we want to be good at helping people become wholehearted followers and helping the same people become influential leaders in the lives of others. Third category of person is the person who aspires. You're part of the 1 Timothy 3:1 group, and you aspire to spiritual leadership. You aspire to vocational ministry or to eldership or to some kind of, to be a discipleship community leader or a deaconess or a deacon, some kind of spiritual leader, a teacher in the body. You aspire to that. Well, then you've got your growth plan right here. You've got your growth plan. And as we all grow together and take responsibility for the people around us and bring them with us, we will see not only ourselves grow, but the people around us. A beautiful church. We want to be a beautiful church. So let's all accept the responsibility to be beautiful leaders and use our influence for good in the lives of others. I'm going to give you a minute just to think about which category you might fall into this morning, and let you pray about that for a minute. If you're in the category that says, yeah, I was kind of thinking I was glad this list wasn't for me, and I realize I need to change my mind about that, I'm going to give you time to talk to God about that. If you're saying, I really did aspire to these qualities, but I really don't want to be a leader, maybe you need to change how you think about that and what God really wants to do with your life. And if you already aspire to spiritual leadership, then you've probably been listening to this message with some areas of growth in mind. I want you to take those to the Lord and talk about that, and then I'll close us in prayer. Thank you, Father, for your word that gives us clarity about who you are and who you call us to be. We're so thankful to be part of Trinity Bible Church, where we believe you are at work, where we believe that you are cultivating us in order to cultivate other people, people who have not yet encountered us, people who have not yet encountered your Son Jesus and his love for them, people who are in need of their own spiritual development. We look forward to seeing how you'll use us to help others. We know that it begins with you making us the people that you want us to be. So we just ask for you to carry out this work in us. For everyone this morning who's taken this message seriously and applied it to their lives, I pray you'll give them insight and energy and the enabling of your Holy Spirit to take some steps towards this vision that you have for each of us. We ask this in your Son's name. Amen. Let me share one thing with you real quick before I let you go. You did a great job last week taking these signs. You did a fabulous job. Remember, as a church, we want you to become wholehearted followers, influential leaders, and gospel extroverts. So thanks for taking these signs. I don't know if we have our new order. We ordered some new ones. Oh, yeah. So they're out. So, hey, you've done a fabulous job. If you didn't get one of these signs, put it in your yard. Easter's only 3 weeks away. It's one of, even if you're not doing it for your neighbor, you might be doing it for yourself, right? By just practicing being a gospel extrovert. So thank you for doing that. What I'd like to do is ask you if you'll stand, and we'll be dismissed with benediction. And then don't forget, part of your presence here is to do ministry in the lives of others. So look for those people that you can encourage. Now may the God of peace, who through the blood of the eternal covenant brought back from the dead our Lord Jesus, that great shepherd of the sheep. May he equip you with everything good for doing his will and work in us what is pleasing to him. Through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen.